You know, every film starts with just an idea, a kind of blueprint. So today, we're going to go behind the scenes of a short film called Bastoni and Denari before a single frame has even been shot. We're going to unpack its story, its symbols, and the very personal heart at its center, all from the director's own words. So, the title, Bastoni e Denari, literally translates to clubs and coins. And this logo you see here, from a classic Italian card deck, well, that's not just a cool design choice. It's a clue. It's basically the key to the entire emotional story. And here's the logline, originally in German, which says, "A trip, two men, decades of silence." It's incredibly simple, but that's what makes it so powerful. In just a few words, it creates this sense of immense weight, right? The heavy burden of everything that's been left unsaid for so long. Okay, so let's unpack that premise, because behind this really simple setup lies a deeply complex and honestly a very relatable emotional landscape. Here's the basic setup. Pasquale, the son, kind of lures his elderly father Michele to this remote cabin for a weekend. His goal? It sounds simple, but it's absolutely monumental, to finally shatter the silence that has pretty much defined their entire relationship. And this really gets to the core of the huge divide between them. You've got Pasquale, born into Swiss stability, who's searching for an emotional connection. And then there's Michele, an immigrant from southern Italy, a man who was forged by hardship, a guy who lived to survive, not necessarily to express himself. They are literally two sides of the same family coin, just separated by experience, by culture, and by time. So how in the world did this giant chasm form between them? Let's take a look at the two completely different worlds that shaped these men. First, let's talk about the father, Michele. He was born into the poverty of southern Italy during World War II. I mean, his whole childhood was just a fight for survival. He comes to Switzerland as a guest worker, and he dedicates his entire life to grueling factory jobs just to provide for his family. For him, love was an action, it was a duty. And that duty, it left very little room for words or any kind of emotional display. Now contrast that with his son, Pasquale. He was born into the safety and stability his father built, so he had the freedom to pursue things like self-expression. He chose art school, a decision his dad just saw as a frivolous luxury. His father's criticism, photography won't put food on the table, created this wound that just never healed. So this trip, it's really Pasquale's desperate attempt to bridge that fundamental misunderstanding. And what's so fascinating is how all of this history is basically encoded in the film's title. Let's start with the father's symbol, Bastoni. This is a Bastoni card from the traditional Italian game Scopa, which the father and son actually play in the film. But it's so much more than just a game piece. It's a powerful symbol for the father's entire life. Bastoni, or staves, they traditionally symbolize work, physical labor, hardship, and just this unwavering duty. It's the perfect emblem for Michele and his entire generation of immigrants who built new lives through pure grit and sacrifice. His whole identity is tied to this struggle. And on the other side of that card game, and that generational divide, we find the son's world, which is represented by the other half of the title. Denari, or coins, well, they symbolize the result of all that sacrifice: prosperity, security, stability. This is Pasquale's world. He has the material comfort that allows him the luxury to search for something more, an emotional wealth his father just never had the time or the language to even pursue. So, Bastoni e Denari. It's the film's entire conflict in just two words: the father's world of hardship versus the son's world of opportunity. It's the tension between living to survive and surviving to truly live. But this isn't just some fictional exercise. To really understand why this story is so important, we have to look at the director's personal motivation. You see, the writer-director Marco Grosso is himself the grandchild of southern Italian immigrants. He sees this film not as his own story, but as a tribute, a way to honor an entire generation whose courage and sacrifice just so often went unvoiced. This quote right here, it reveals the very heart of his motivation. It's a question that's born from love, this deep desire to understand the memories that were intentionally buried, the stories that were just deemed too heavy to share. This film is his way of digging for those hidden truths. And here is his ultimate mission. The entire film is an attempt to give a voice to the voiceless, to translate decades of silent love, sacrifice, and pain into something we can finally see and hear. Ultimately, the film explores one family's silence, but it leaves us with a question that echoes in all of our lives. It really forces us to consider the unspoken histories and the quiet gaps in our own families, and it asks something powerful. What conversations are you waiting to have?